Justin Purser here. I'm here with Viv Thompson and Ben Thomson to try and gain some insight into different vintage conditions, and in particular 2011, which presented some challenges. From my perspective, they're a great resource in the cellar and using that history and knowledge that they have. So maybe start with you, Viv. 2011, normal vintage or something a bit different, or?
Very abnormal, very difficult year, a lot of early rain, and people had very big rains in January, which is probably one of the heaviest rains I can ever remember that time of the year. And it does create a lot of disease problems, a lot of humidity, a lot of moisture, berries blowing up. Potentially it was a disastrous year, potentially. But luckily, I think Ben managed to get on top of it with the sprays and with opening up foliage. We did a lot of cutting back that year. Maybe do you want to talk about what we cut back and opened up the foliage?
Yeah, we wouldn't normally leaf pluck or anything like that, Shiraz, or for most of our things, normally only Pinot we would only do generally, but this year, or in the 2011 year, we leaf plucked, shoot thinned, cut canes out just to make sure we get some air in there to try and make sure it's survived. And we spent a lot of time lifting wires, and then we had so much growth we couldn't get in with the trimmers, so we had to go in by hand because the foliage grew that quickly. It came over and started to fall down, so if we went in too hard, cut too much foliage off, so we went through and did it all by hand. Which is a lot of work went into it that year, and we saved it all, but it was just a lot of work had to be done.
Yeah, and I just noticed that a lot of fruit was hand-picked, and it seemed that might have helped. So you eliminated
selecting the fruit a bit more when picking. Certainly helped. There was bits where we did get a little bit of mould in spots, so we were allowed to, we could hand pick around certain areas. But if we hadn't gone in and opened up the canopies, I'd say we could have lost all of it really. That's the potential it had. So then there were vineyards around here that did lose their whole crop basically. But it's interesting. I find we'd sort of seen it all before, not to that extent. But a lot of the newer growers in the region, in the last 15, 20 years have really had pretty dry years to contend with. And a lot of people in the region and new growers didn't, had never faced conditions like this. So it was really interesting. We're getting, asked a lot what to do, and there's people who'd never seen Downy before. We'd been there and seen it all before, so we had a pretty good idea how to attack it and what to do. So I think that put us, really ahead of the rest of the pack.
In good stead
to try know what to do. In wet years.
Yeah,
We've had wet years before, but not to this extent. Haven't had water running through the vineyard 3 feet deep.
Yeah. Well, the only one I can remember is '93. I think that was a pretty wet year. Yeah. But I think it was more end of '92 that it was really wet.
Yeah, we had in '92. We had a lot of rain leading up to right up to Christmas time, rain after Christmas time. But we were very fortunate, I think, in coming into '93. I think it was about halfway through the third week in January, we just cut out boom, just like that. And we had clear, dry conditions after that, which didn't happen in 2011. The previous year we had a lot of rain like that was in 1963. I remember the year very well, the year I was married. And we were married in January, and we came home, we'd had 6 inches of rain, not unlike 2011. And I'd never seen a spray cart until
really? So 63 was the
first
year
time
for the spray
we
cart.
ever had a spray cart. And we lost a lot with Downy mildew this year. We lost a lot of foliage, and I remember with our Dolcetto down here, which was then called Mulback in those days, we were picking that a bit over 9 Boma, and it was thin, wishy-washy. It was pretty awful. But anyway, you learn your lessons as you go along, and 2011, despite being potentially a pretty ordinary year, actually turned out quite well. But that's because I think we got on top of it in the vineyard, and then in the winery also. We knew we had problems and took steps to try and with a lot of hand sorting and that sort of thing. It certainly helped a lot.
It was the first year we bought the shaking table.
And a lot of times beside the shaking table.
What a year!
People like this at the end of it.
Or trying to buy your first shaken table on the worst year we've ever had.
We might never use it again, but we almost paid it for 2011 because we had such a mix-up, or not such a mixed crop coming in.
Oh, I don't know, Viv. I think the sorting table's good. You can pick out overripe fruit as well.
With what also we did in before the vintage of 2011 was go through in some areas where we machine harvested and attempted to pick out the mouldy fruit, drop the mouldy fruit in the ground. And we spent a lot of time doing that, particularly Rimney we did that, but other areas also. And you sort of knew the areas. I mean, you could pick the areas in the vineyard with a lot of growth and a lot of foliage, and you knew if you're going there, you're going to find mouldy fruit.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a matter of going through the whole vineyard. We couldn't do that, but we could go into those areas which were most affected, and we could drop a lot of fruit in the ground.
Yeah. And Rimney Vineyard is the vineyard owned by Best. That's just in the hills behind Great Western. The other thing I wanted to mention was that the conditions, apart from being wetter than normal, were cooler than normal. And from what I've seen in terms of the wines, they exhibit some of those really classic, like almost cold, like really cold kind of climate characters that you get from kind of colder, wetter vintages.
It was cool, but it felt hotter. It felt hotter, but the humidity, because we'd had so much rain, like we'd had I think 500 mils of rain in our growing season, which is our whole year's rainfall generally. But it was just so humid, like 28 degrees, and it was like 90% humidity.
Right.
It was just. At night, it didn't cool down much at night, but just mainly because the humidity was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's quite interesting when you talk about the conditions and being cool conditions and how this affected the wine. One of the things we were concerned about that the wines didn't have sufficient weight. But I remember looking at our 2011 bin 1, and while it's not a big monster of wine, it had good weight, but also it had this lovely sort of peppery type character. And it's one of those things I thought, wow, this looks fantastic, but can we do it again? But we can't do it again because, well, we can if we've got the similar conditions, but I think the conditions in that year dictated very much the wine we made. And I reckon that wine was pretty good.
It's interesting you talk about the pepper, because that's one of the things I noted in that wine and the rest of the Shiraz, is that the pepper character is quite potent, but it's more a kind of white pepper rather than a black pepper that you tend to see in the wines around here. So it makes it a little bit distinctive and finer. It looks. The
last time we had those conditions, well, not the conditions, but it was pepper with obviously the vineyard was 88.
Right.
And that happened, and the 88 finished right throughout a lot of southern Australia. The pepper conditions were quite not strong, but they were distinctly there, and that's the last time I can distinctly remember having really true pepper characters at Great Western. The last one was 88, and I think before that it was 84. I mean, they were slightly cooler years. They weren't years like 2011, but they were a lot drier. But we did have a bit of rainfall those years, and also it was probably a cooler summer.
Okay, well, I think you can see why the Thompsons have great, resources and experience to be able to handle a vintage like 2011. And again, it's such an invaluable resource that we have here at Best Great Western in the vineyard and in the cellar to have that experience and knowledge of what to do, the right thing to do in all conditions. So thank you.